Welcome everybody. Today's video finds us out here in the Canyon of the Ancients National Monument. And we're going to take a look at another of these ancestral Anasazi ruins out here. We're going to take a look at the San Canyon Pueblo. This is a place I've never been before. I've seen the sign and I've always just went by it and I've never came over here and taken a look. So here we are today. Now this is built in the 1100s, 1200s, so 800 years plus years old. And this was a massive site. It had 420 rooms, 100 kivas, which are the round ceremonial buildings, and it had 14 towers. So we're gonna walk through here. It's a little bit of a hike down to the ruin, and then I guess the ruin, they excavated it, and then they did all the studies, and then they buried it back to where they don't have to come back in here and maintain the walls and stuff like that. So let's walk through here and let's see what we see. So this is the area that it's in. Nowadays it's farmland, so they grow alfalfa, beans, all that kind of stuff out here. This used to be farmland for the Anasazi also. There would be Pueblos all through here that were kind of like the little farm villages. Now it's just like this. And then over this way, this is the canyon. And this is where the Pueblo was built, was right on the rim of it. And there's a nice county road that brings you up here, but it has a small parking lot. Now there's no services here, no bathrooms, no water, no anything. When you come up, you can either go to the Pueblo or you can do the San Canyon Trail. It's 6 miles to the trailhead. And there's no motorized vehicles allowed here, bikes or horses, I don't believe. So this is the way to the Pueblo. It's about 100 yards down here. So at the San Canyon Pueblo, there were several hundred people that lived here. And it was also, they believe, like a community gathering point. So the local villages and stuff would come over here and they would do all the stuff, trade, whatever else they needed to do. So I think it was abandoned around the 1290s. There was a massive drought that hit this area. So it was like a 26-year long drought where it didn't rain. And if you're a dryland farmer, you kind of need water to drink a little bit. The crops need some water. So there was one of those things. And they also, over farmed the soil. They didn't know how to rotate their crops. So the soil wasn't as productive. I mean, the soil is really, really good. This red soil is good farmland, but you do need water and a different variety of crops to grow. Yeah, I really love coming out here and seeing stuff like this. All the brush, all the trees. So the trees that they used were these cedar trees like this. They would cut these down and then they'd use them as poles for like the roof and stuff. And they would cut them down with stone axes, which would have been a lot of work. And you can see over here, it's kind of interesting. There's the power lines that they brought in. And my dad was telling me he was actually on the job that drilled those holes and installed those lines out here. Yeah, the ruin is just down over here. Now they came in 93 to 2003 and they excavated it. And then what they did is they backfilled. So you're not going to have all the walls that you would see up at Mesa Verde, because what they do is they backfill it so they don't have to come out here and maintain these walls. Because if they put the walls back together, then they have to come back in and fix any cracks and all of that stuff. So in order to protect the site, they backfill it. So you're not going to see the full, like what this ruin would have looked like when it was in use. And it's right up here. You can just see it in these trees. So there's two halves to this here. We're basically right in the middle. You can see there's a little creek bed here. So this ruin was shaped like an L, and it goes in a straight line up this way. And then to the right, if you go that way, was like the community area that had most of the kivas and like this huge square, like D-shaped building. We'll look at it next. We'll go up this way and we'll get a good viewpoint of the ruin. And this right here was the back wall. So this would have been a wall, and then all the rooms would have been on the right side over here. And then that overlooks the canyon. This is the preservation level of pretty much the whole site. So they can study like the depressions in the ground, because the walls would be higher and then the roofs would have collapsed down as those cedar trees would have rotted away. They would have collapsed and the dirt would have fell down and then they can see that this would have been a room, while the existing walls would have been here. And they could also tell by the shape of the room what it would have been used for. So these are all just rooms all through here. But you can see that tree is growing right there. And then this was a room where it's collapsed down, and you can see the walls that were around it. And they were all through these trees here. Now, obviously, back when this was in use, the trees would have been cleared off. They would have used the trees that were here when they expanded the Pueblo. They would have cut those down to use them for the roofs and ladders and stuff like that. They also would have used any of the brush for, cooking, all the normal things that they would have done here for their daily lives. Let's keep going up here because you can get a nice viewpoint of this whole ruin. And what the National Park Service has done is they've built this little trail so you can follow it around. And then back in here, this would have all been farmland, everything else. And they would have got water from the spring here in Sand Canyon. And then this canyon eventually goes down to McElmo Canyon and then out to the San Juan River. And there were people all across this mesa here. There were thousands of people living out here. They started really getting thick. They left like the basket weaver period where they made primarily baskets and they were hunter-gatherers. And in like the 750s, they started doing Pueblos. And they call that like the Pueblo period. And they would do these ruins like this. They'd build these houses out of the sandstone. And they were more just subsistent farmers out here. You see there's more of the rooms. But if you can imagine, if anybody's ever been to Mesa Verde, to Cliff Palace, which is absolutely massive. And it's a must-see if you're in this area. Go to Mesa Verde and go to Cliff Palace. This is twice as big as Cliff Palace. Right up here, this is pretty much the furthest east part of the ruin. You can see a little bit of the wall. And then they had a few buildings here. And they were built all along this canyon rim. You can see it kind of looks like a L or like an elongated C. And you can see the whole canyon. So they would have went down in here. This is where the spring would have been in Sand Canyon. And then they would have been able to go down a canyon. That goes over towards McElmo, which is like 6.5 miles or so away from here. Yeah, so you see, this is the top of the mesa here. And they had houses all along here. All through the trees now. So they had 420 of the rooms and 100 kivas, which are amazing. Now they think maybe the kivas were used for different functions here. They weren't just for ceremonies because they were in amongst the houses. And then there were 14 towers, and they say they weren't lookout towers because they weren't built at the highest points. They were just other towers, so they're not exactly sure the functionality of all of them. But what a beautiful area. All these trees out here. If you can imagine hundreds of people and this massive Pueblo here, this would have been something to see back in the day. Okay, so let's hike back down. We'll go look on to the right of that sign when we first came in. But yeah, it's a pretty impressive ruin. This site here, you do have to use your imagination quite a bit to kind of picture what it would have looked like. But it is pretty impressive in the size. And I'm always amazed how they built them up here on these, cliff edges. But I mean, that was close to their source of water. So those guys' daily life, other than, rounding up berries and roots and all of that stuff, hunting small animals, rabbit. And if they get lucky, they can get a deer. But, repairing broken tools, broken pots, making arrowheads, hunting, getting wood gathered up. And they domesticated turkeys, and then they grew their beans and squash and, their corn. They were busy, plus they were hauling in all these stones. Here, they could find them on the site fairly easy. So they could just get them up here on the top of the mesa. But, they also had to shape them, chisel them, bang them down, put them into place, build the walls, build the roof, all the stuff. Just an impressive feat. And then to go get water, you had to climb down into the canyon to the spring. And then they would build check dams down there also to store water and then help them with their farming. It's pretty cool. And this was all, you know, 800 years ago. So this is kind of what they think it would have looked like. So we went all the way up here for the viewpoint, and then we're kind of about right here right now. And so we'll see some of the towers and then this D-shaped building over this way. And you can see how large the structure is. Really cool. Yeah, like I said, they came in here and they excavated it. And, you know, they found all the clues to kind of tell them when it was built and everything. They can do the carbon-14 dating on any of the wood they found. So they know pretty close to when this was built. And then they came back in after they excavated, then they refilled it with dirt. So this is the outer wall. So if you're out here, there weren't any houses built here. So you would have came over the wall into this community area. And this is the area that had the most open space, or the common ground. And they would have been in here doing all the, you know, pottery making, all of the normal stuff. And you can see some of the rooms that were over there. They say this was broke down into two halves. And they say in a, like, modern, like if you go to the Zuni Pueblo, they break down their communities into two halves. And both halves will have certain responsibilities for the upkeep of the community. We can see over here a few more rocks and stuff. Let's take a look. Yeah, not a whole lot to see here. So they would have taken the artifacts and taken them over to the museum in Escalante. I don't know if there's any of these up at Mesa Verde, any of the ruins or the artifacts they found here on the ruin. And it's a little bit more down this way. You see all the yucca. They would have used those plants, the sagebrush. They've extracted dyes for painting their pottery and the petroglyphs and stuff like that. They would have used everything here. Now, when they left, what I was told is that they left pots and everything like that here in place. It was like a gradual migration. They weren't like having to flee, you know, like a forest fire or anything like that. So they could leave stuff here, they would move, and then they could just make new pottery and stuff wherever they moved. And they think a lot of them went down towards like the Little Colorado. Some of them went over to Chaco Canyon, and they were the ancestors of some of the modern day tribes, like the Santa Clara, Zuni, Hopi, all of that stuff. And you can see more of the rooms over here. So we're just kind of wandering around in the middle of this common area here. Yeah, you can see where this is basically washed out. You can see where the creek is formed here and went right down through the middle of this building. Okay, so it looks like where we were just in was this great kiva. So that's what they've decided this was by the shape of it here. So they say the kivas became a lot less common by the 1200s. I can't make out the shape, but maybe those stone walls would have been the outer circular part. There are some great kivas. If you go to Aztec, the Aztec ruin is a humongous kiva. And then they have Chaco Canyon has some, and then over at Lowry Ruins, which is part of this Canyon of the Ancients, it has a huge kiva that's really cool to see. And I'll probably pin a comment to it because it's really a nice little hidden gem over here. You can see kind of the southwestern part of this ruin. And we'll go look at the canyon rim, and then that'll be all we see because we've seen kind of pretty much all of it. Yeah, there's no real standing walls here to see. So if you want that look, you'll need to go to another ruin. Here, this is pretty primitive condition, but it's really spectacular how large this ruin is. Yep, so we made it to the end of the trail. And this is what the end of the trail looks like. So that's pretty rugged. So they would have chiseled hand and toe hold places to go down there to get to the spring. And I tell you what, this country gets super hot and it gets really cold in the wintertime. So these guys had a pretty hard life. But, you know, they figured it out. They learned how to adapt to their environment, and they flourished here for several hundred years. Over here, this is the outer wall. These are about the best walls that you will see inside of here. There's just so many rooms to this ruin. Like I said, there's 420 of them, plus 100 kivas and 14 towers. Well, that'll finish up our video over here. You got to see this Sand Canyon Pueblo. I really enjoy stuff like this. I talked to one other guy, that's the only other person I've seen here, and he was just loving this. He said he did all the trail hikes down here and was on his way over to Hovenweep from here, which is a really important ruin in this region. So Hovenweep is good, Lowry Ruins is great, Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, all of those are definitely stuff to come over here and check out if you're in this area. And I would recommend, if you really love just kind of off the beaten path type stuff, to come out here, explore at your own pace and see stuff, come over here to this Sand Canyon Ruins. You're not going to see like a wow, but you'll be able to see kind of how it looks whenever they come out here and they excavate. And you got to use your imagination, which to me is a lot of fun. You can kind of picture the daily life and how this building looked and stuff like that. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and you get to see more stuff like this. I do stuff all over the place, and this is where I am today, so I'm enjoying this. And if you have any questions or comments, leave it down below. If you know more than me about this run, leave me a comment down below. I'd really like to learn a little bit more. And until next time, from over here in Colorado at this Canyon of the Ancients, remember, life is a journey. So until next time.